Hello everyone, Helljumper here, and this is my first video in my series of guides on how to be a better player for team-based games for Steel Division 2, with an emphasis on 10v10 and 4v4 gameplay. I chose these two game modes since these two modes are most likely going to be the primary starting point for a brand new player to enter multiplayer, as most new players will most likely feel these modes will allow themselves to have less of an impact on their team for individual mistakes as compared to a 1v1. Starting off with one of the first things you need to know when starting up a team game in a 10v10 or a 4v4 is understanding how to mark your location. So to do this, go to the bottom right of the screen when starting a game and you have the defense beacon, attack beacon, help beacon, and then a custom message. So in the very beginning of the game, you need to select one of these, primarily the defense beacon or the attack beacon, and then mark on the map where you want to go. This lets your allies know where you are actually going and where you plan to focus all your units at. The next thing you need to understand is if you're going to be a frontline player or a support player. A frontline player is pretty self-explanatory. Their job is pretty much to go out and capture flags. A support player is meant to build up artillery and planes and infantry to help support the frontline players. However, just because you're playing support does not mean you should not support the front line. One of the biggest mistakes that many support players try to do is just sit in the spawn just with artillery and planes early on in the game at the detriment of the front line, like you could see in this game here. The people on the very far right are not investing anything into assaulting towards the center of the map, and in fact have an overinvestment of AT guns and artillery pretty much just sitting in the spawn, which will not help take any flags. The last thing I'm going to go over in this video is going over some simple interface options that are actually pretty important to being good at the game, that are actually turned off just when you first get the game by default. So I reset everything to just the default. Now, the very first thing is the icon type. So it's set to RTS icons, so let's take a look at that. So these are typically the normal icons for your T-34s, Panzer IVs. Everything pretty much has its own different icon. Now, if we go back to interface, change it to NATO icons, and apply, then everything is in the NATO style for infantry squads, tanks, commanders, things like that. I typically like to have mine just to normal RTS icons, but that's really up to you. The next important thing is show armor values. So it's by default set to no. So let's take a look at that. All you see is a T-34. You don't see the penetration value. You don't see the armor value. Now if you scroll out, look at enemy, same thing. Now let's go back to interface and turn it to yes. Hit apply. And then now, as you can see, you see the 145 penetration value, and then you see the 110 armor value. And not only that, but you also see the enemy's penetration value and armor value. So it's good for knowing what your units can kill and what can kill your units instead. The next interface option that you could adjust is unit aggregation. So unit aggregation is essentially where all your units of one type are grouped together. So for here, two T-34s are close enough together that they'll be grouped. So you could just click on just this one icon and it will command both tanks. Same thing goes for 6 infantry. And if you scroll in, then you could micro them one by one. Now, one thing you can do is go to interface and then tactical allow label aggregation, and you can turn that off. Hit apply and continue. Now, no matter how far you zoom out, you could micro units one by one. Now, this is more of a personal preference because I've seen some pros like to use unit aggregation and some don't. It doesn't really matter. It's just a personal preference. I personally like to use no unit aggregation because I like to be zoomed out most of the time and microing my units one by one. One other thing to know is, so you could give a unit an order and after a few seconds you won't be able to see that order. If you hit shift, then you could see that order permanently. until you release shift. Another thing to do is go down here to this little arrow, turn it hit it once, and then hit again, and then for the rest of the match, any order you give, you'll be able to see your orders all the time. So the next thing we're going to cover is how to call in multiple units at once. Okay, so say we take this Panzer Grenadier, say we want to call 4 squads. You could just click as many times as you want, and then just call them in that way. And then you'll have, 5 squads coming in here. Another thing you could do is pull up the menu and then hold shift to click on that, and then now you can choose exactly where you want them to go as soon as they're called in on the map. The last thing I'm going to cover in this video today is how to give individual orders for groups of units. So here I have a selection of 3 mortars. Now I hit Control 1, and now they're in Control Group 1. So if I hit 1, then they all get selected. Now, hit T as the key for target ground, and then I can give them all in order to attack ground. But let's say I want to give each single piece an individual order. Well, you could actually do that. So I'm going to stop that order, and now what you're going to do is hit Tab, and if you see, when I hit Tab, it highlighted this one unit. All of them are still selected on the map, but in this little menu down here, only this one is selected. So if I hit T, then that's going to give that one unit an attack run order. Now if I hit Tab again, then it's moving to the next one, and then it has an individual order. And then same thing with the last one. So it works differently with different types of artillery. So say I call in these 3 half-track mortars. Now, if I want to create a control group with 2 different types of artillery in one group. So now I hit 1, and you see it selected both different types of mortars, but if I hit Tab, then it will only cycle through the 2 different types of mortars rather than individually through each one. So for at least with artillery, you want to keep each control group that you make just with one type of artillery to give them better individual orders for, say, counter battery, or if you just want to kill specific targets. Thank you for watching my video. If you liked my content, then please like and subscribe. If you have anything that you would like covered in my next video, then please feel free to post your questions in the comments.